Cinema was seen as threatening in all kinds of ways. Firstly, because it was shown in a very dark room where children could get up to all kinds of things, and indeed adults might do all kinds of things to children. That was a fear originally. That they would have to look at the screen, so they would be exposed to the images even if they didn't want to be. And that in particular, their encounter with fiction, and this is an argument about fiction, was with fictional images. Remember, until 1927 we're dealing with silent films with written script in between, but very early on it's very much a concern with pictures. That if you show children pictures, this will have an effect on their behaviour, their understanding and their mind, which print wouldn't have. So a lot of the early discussion of cinema was actually about what it meant for children to see, as it was then called, moving pictures, and what effect that might have on them in all kinds of ways, from affecting their eyesight, leaving them morally corrupt, through to seeing on the screen things which they would then be tempted to imitate in real life.
Adult society reacted in various ways to regulate this threat.
The concerns about cinema were mainly middle and upper class people, what are sometimes called cultural guardians, people like teachers, lecturers, vicars, women's institutes, those kinds of people who saw themselves at that time as very much concerned with the general morality of the population. And they're the kind of people who also complained about drink. You know, so they're kind of middle-class moralists, if you like, and they made it their business to poke their noses in and find out what was going on in and around the cinema. In a lot of societies, this is where we get our system of film classification from, which we still have today. And originally in Britain, for instance, it was a U and an A. Children could go to an A film, but they had to be accompanied by an adult. That's what A meant. And U was unclassified. It meant anybody could go. And those were the two basic classifications that we had. Of course, there was a very strict form of censorship anyway from the very beginning. And so the films they were seeing were fairly anodyne anyway. So you didn't see the kind of films then that you could see now. The real trigger for film classification was the horror film. Because the other kinds of films, violence and crime, were so heavily censored. And when the horror films, particularly a version of Dracula that appeared about 1929 to 1930, and they couldn't quite bring themselves to censor it, and they didn't quite know what to do with it, so what they did was create a film classification, H. And that was the first classification that excluded children. And from that point on, we then got more elaborate classifications. In America, they had something called the Hays Code.
The code sets up high standards of performance for motion picture producers,
where a script had to be submitted for approval before the film could even be made. And it was a much stricter code than anywhere else in the world. Most societies have this system of classification, which is based on age, remember. What it specifically says is, this film is suitable for this age group. So it's an age classification, which tells you that it's all based on notions of childhood and youth and what they shouldn't see.
Although access to films could be regulated, by the 1950s a new threat to children emerged. And this one was right inside the living room.